My name is Gloria Longval, that's my maiden name, and Ralph, R-A-L-P-H, is my married name.
Okay. And where are you from originally?
Originally from Ybor City, Tampa, Florida, the first oldest community, Cuban community in Ybor City, cigar factories.
And so how did you come by this unusual photograph?
Well, my husband had passed away in 1965, and I was really out of my mind. Had 2 children. My husband was 46, and we're both artists, and we were connected with our gallery in Los Angeles. And I was in a terrible emotional state. So when my children were in school, and I couldn't paint, I couldn't teach, so I was losing a lot there. When my children were in school, I decided, well, I think to distract myself, instead of going to the museum, that would have been too painful for me. I decided to go to antique shops and auction houses and distract myself and get involved and maybe get inspired by the things that I see. So I lived in Van Nuys in the valley, and there was an estate sale about maybe 10 blocks away from where I lived. So I said, oh, great, I can just walk there. It's a beautiful day. I went in, and there was a guard there and no one else. And they had beautiful things all over the place. I couldn't afford anything, but I enjoyed everything, and I enjoyed talking to the guard who told me a little bit about things, and he asked about me. I told him, oh, I think if you have any old frames, not too expensive, I can put my drawings in there, and that would keep me busy doing that. So he said, well, here in the corner, they're very inexpensive frames here. Very inexpensive. You can have, they're not too interested in that. They're interested in the bigger things. So he said, just look through them. I said, well, I think I can only afford 5. So he says, okay, take them. So it was about, like I said, 40 cents each. So we had a nice chat. He lifted my spirits. I went home, and the next day, I went into my studio, which was a garage next to the house I was renting, and I started to take them apart. And about the 3rd frame, I think it was, that I took it apart, and it was a reproduction of flowers, very gaudy-looking flowers, very old, I don't know how old the reproduction, but it was a reproduction. So I took the reproduction out, and then there was a mat. And then I lifted that mat, and the photograph was there. And then there was another mat. So it was protected by 2 mats and then put in this frame with this reproduction.
Your name is?
I'm Luckie Daniels.
And what job do you perform at the Taos News?
I'm currently the web director at Taos News.
Okay. How did you come by the photograph?
Well, on the day that Gloria came in, I actually sit next to you, Rick, and we're separated by a partition. And I really hadn't paid a lot of attention. I heard Gloria talking, and I heard you guys discussing this photograph. And then it got more and more interesting for me. Gloria started talking about the historical relevance of the photograph and wanting to know who was in the image. I realized that it was an image of African American men, possibly soldiers, and that piqued my interest. I'm web director here, but I'm also a genealogist. I've been researching for about 16 years and actually created a military website last year. So this has kind of been far more in my wheelhouse over the past year than any time in my research.
What have we found out about the picture?
Well, Gloria had, of course, with the original assessment, it was pretty spot on in some areas. So we had a really good trail to follow. And what I did first was to post that information online because I knew that it would get all of my friends, all of the fellow researchers that I'm connected with curious, and that they'd start digging in. And you saw immediately everyone started digging in. And what I also found phenomenal is that the people of Taos dug in. Like we literally on our Facebook page have a community of researchers and former military men who have been involved in helping us gather and follow the breadcrumb trail. So we do know that they were Buffalo soldiers. We do know that regiment, the 9th Regiment, they're referred to affectionately as Troop G. We know that they were recruited out of New Orleans in the late right after 1867 or so. that they had a migration. That first they went to Texas, then they came to New Mexico, and then they were moved on to Nebraska, which is where Fort Robinson is. We believe that Troop G was actually posted at Fort Robinson, that they served under the third, the third colonel who graduated from West Point, Charles Young, which is pretty phenomenal. And we've even found a list of names. We've acquired a list of names of officers. So we found a lot. We haven't been able to connect them as yet to the actual photograph, which is more of an effort. Because they were non-commissioned soldiers and because they were African American and the time period, it's far easier to identify white commissioned officers than it is NCOs who are African American. We're still working on it. I think that Fort Robinson is going to help us in that effort. And then we also have the Nebraska Historical Society who's giving us a hand. At first I just posted, do we know who these men are? Right? Have we identified them? Have you seen them? Can you help me in this effort?
I would love to know who they are.
Well, we posted their picture,
Yeah.
and then I posted, of course, the detailed information that you actually received when you had the appraisal
Yeah.
done. And what we start to do in research first is we go in to validate the information that we have. Because
Yeah,
that's our
right,
benchmark,
right,
right?
of course.
That tells us whether or not we're looking in the right place or whether we need to shift gears.
Right.
And for the most part, I think the appraiser was spot on. The only area that I believe that he was off was with the foreign
Okay, but wait a
decoration.
minute, I've been thinking about that a long time now. During the Civil War, remember, I think the French were, the French and the British, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, couldn't they have gotten a decoration from the French or the British?
Let me tell you what their decoration is, and
Okay.
it's kind of mysterious that it's kept as such a mystery.
Yeah.
They were recipients of GAR medals, and this is a very kind of distinguished medal that post Civil War soldiers received, right? And it was a union that was formed of Army and Navy. And they received these GAR medals. And so and that's, I think, why he found the medal to be so unique.
Oh, you see.
And thought because it wasn't a Medal of Honor, it wasn't any of the customary medals that we were accustomed to seeing. But if you look, that's the GAR medal.
Oh, wow, isn't that great?
And we received that, Gloria, from the Army War College.
No kidding.
And they asked us to sign a certificate
Oh
of
my
authenticity
God,
in
really?
order to receive it. And so it was a big deal. I had never seen this
That
medal
is-
before.
Isn't that wonderful?
And they pulled this from their archives to validate that we were looking at the right medals. So we do believe it was a reunion photo. Because they're older, some of them are kind of out of shape, they've got a little pudgy.
Yeah, he definitely said that. He emphasized that.
That it was a reunion photo.
No, that it wasn't. He didn't say that it was taken after the Civil War.
Absolutely. And they did serve. After the Civil War, these soldiers didn't really have a home to go back to return to.
Yeah.
And so he does feel that all of the experts that looked, and we have two colonels who have really weighed in with a lot of information, they feel that this soldier was still in active duty. Like it almost feels as if he was called away from active duty just to take this picture.
Yeah. You think so?
Yeah. Now, Colonel Bill Hain, he has just been amazing in providing information. He was actually the first person who reached out to me, and he said, "Lucky, I think you guys are looking in the wrong place," because initially we were looking at Fort Bayard. We thought that was where the photo had been taken. And then Bill came back and said, "No, I'm sure that this is Fort Robinson." And so we turned the research direction and set our sights on Fort Robinson. And he was absolutely spot on. And he's been able to identify the commissioned soldiers between 1895 and 1898. And these are the names. So in all likelihood, Gloria, these are the names of our soldiers. Even if we can't map them to each specific soldier, we know that we have the group of names of those soldiers.
And they are?
Charles Goodloe, John Gregg, Corporal Jackson Lewis, Sergeant John E. Miller, Sergeant John E. Oglesby, Sergeant Arthur E. Ransom, Sergeant William Stanton, Sergeant William A. Vorman,
Vorman, yeah.
and Sergeant A.P. Winfield, which is actually a surname in my family. Winfield and Wingfield.
Really?
Yes.
Maybe you're connected to one of these soldiers.
Well, then I just pass out.
I know.
That would be too much for
Wouldn't that
me.
be too much? Oh my God.
As you can see, my comment back to him was, I'm simply speechless. I don't
I
know
am too. My
what to
goodness.
say.
The photograph, the group photo, had another photo on the back. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes. And I was shocked. I didn't know, I just turned it over very slowly and then I went, wow, there's another one here.
And so, do we believe that those two photographs are related?
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
And, it shows what it surprised me because initially I didn't believe so. I thought they just so happened to be two historic photos who may have been unrelated that were attached to the same mat. But because of just the energy that it created online, I thought, let me post that photo just in case someone recognizes the building. Yeah. Because our only hope was to be able to recognize that building and be able to timestamp it with the group or connect it to the 9th Cavalry. Well, that didn't happen until recently. Once we turned our sights to Fort Robinson, I outreached the Fort Robinson Historical Museum. And I got in touch with Jerry Taylor there, and he was looking at our troops, and he said, I definitely think this is Fort Robinson. And he said, but there's an image that you have on your site of a building, and I'm sure I've seen that building in another photo. And after a couple of days, he sent me this one. And he said, that's the same building. And it absolutely is the same building.
Oh God, it makes me feel so good. It makes me feel like I'm very close to these men because I used to take out the photo quite often and look at them and talk to them and everything. So it makes me feel like I helped in recognizing who they are and what they did. Mm-hmm. And that will bring a lot. In fact, I met recently an African American. He saw the photo. And he had tears in his eyes, put his arms around me. He said, you brought these men alive. And that means a lot to us because it gives us a lot of pride. Mm-hmm. So I was very moved by that. And that's, but I'm a little sad. It's my family. I find that they're my brothers and my uncles, and I don't know what's going to happen to them now.
Do you have any plans for the photos?
I've been thinking a lot about it, and I will make decisions, in the future. Yeah, sometime in the future.
I always feel like when ancestors kind of poke me like this, that they're fighting not to be lost, like they're fighting not to be removed from history and for their stories not to just kind of fade away into the ether. Yeah. And this is that instance. So I think there's far more to learn. But the beauty of what you've done is that they will never be hidden again. Like my grandchildren, and my great-grandchildren will be able to go and to see these men and know of what you've done. And that's pretty phenomenal. You have done a phenomenal thing.
Well, like I said to you before, it was destined when we were born, and now it is done.
I believe that. I believe that.